On this Wednesday morning, after some rain, it's time to take a look at our crops as we've progressed this year. And I have Brad Mathson. He's technology manager from Allied Cooperative. Harvest really moved along smoothly until just this last week, but I always look at it as we need a little bit of a break and maybe a chance to look back and see what those crops are looking like. What are you seeing out there?
It's been a whirlwind year. I guess you could classify this as a year of variability. We went from dry, where everybody was worried a little bit that we were going to have a drought this year, to wet, and it never quit raining, and then all of a sudden it turned dry again, and now we're back into a wet phase. We went from cool so we were behind at the beginning of the year, to hot during most of the year, so we got caught up, and the crop matured nicely. And when we look at our report card, our harvest yield data, that is definitely showing what the year was out. Highly variable. I've seen some of the best yields we've ever seen in this area, and I've seen some of the worst yields we've ever seen in this area. So it's huge, huge swings. Soybeans taking kind of more of a brunt. They didn't perform because of that last bit of, kind of the wet weather in the spring, and then couple that with the dry weather in end of August and September, really took their toll on soybean yields. So a lot of variability this year.
And with that variability, you see a lot of different things out there in the fields. What are some of the things specifically that you saw?
Well, one of my customers told me this fall during harvest, he says the sins of the spring are sure evident this year. So anything that we didn't do quite right, and a lot of that was around Mother Nature's with the weather, and I contribute a lot of this to weatherproofing the crop, and that came from Mother Nature itself last winter. We didn't have any really frost in the ground at all. We rely on Mother Nature freezing that ground, expanding it, breaking it up a little bit. So we had fairly tight soils going into the season. And then you couple it with all this extra rain, which packed it even more, really created an environment that was not friendly to the root system. And we need those roots for moisture. Well, this year we had plenty of rain, so they didn't really have to go foraging for water, and that's what roots will do. It kept them shallow, so it also kept what we're actually pulling the nutrients from the soil in a smaller amount. So that was probably the biggest thing that I've seen where we had good mellow soils. We had phenomenal yields where the water was able to move away and then come back in. Roots were able to go down. Those yields were great, both on corn and soybeans. Where we had the tight soils, that's where yields really, really suffered. So that was the biggest thing, is managing this root zone. We really learned this year that the importance of that. And, it's 100, 150 bushels out there in most cases in the same field with the same variety and all of those types of things. On soybeans, we saw that same thing, but it was more like 15 to 20 bushels, 30 bushels sometimes in yield. So the big takeaway I look at this year is we have to manage that root zone and make sure we're out there checking in the spring, and are we loose? Are we going to have good root penetration to weatherproof that crop through whatever Mother Nature throws at us? The other big thing I saw this year on corn especially is nitrogen management. If you got the nitrogen on exactly when you were supposed to this year, that was absolutely the worst time. You got it on too early. We got those heavy rains. How much did we actually lose? We also lost extra nitrogen on manure applied this year. That also hindered us, and those factors. So the late applied nitrogen this year was the winner, and seeing some exceptional yields on those types of things. So there again, you can do everything right, and it turns out wrong because Mother Nature throws us a curveball. Plant health was another issue that we saw this year. If you had any stress on there, we seemed to catch more diseases, anthracnose, northern corn leaf blight, those types of things. And then tar spot came in late into the season, did a little bit of damage, but not nearly as severe. But the corn that wasn't stressed as much didn't seem to bother that. The diseases weren't as critical on that crop as what it could have been. So all those factors, a lot of factors in here, relate back to the variability that we saw.
What about the coolness of the soil this year? That seemed to be kind of a hindrance to a lot of things too, didn't it?
Well, that hurt us really early on. We had warmer soil temperatures at the end of March than we did at the end of May. Everything just sat there especially the soybeans did not hardly grow. Corn didn't hardly grow there for 2 to 3 weeks in the spring. And that's when we're setting on corn, especially we're setting our maximum yield. That's where we're setting how many rows around the ear we're at. And so that's why we're seeing 2 to 4 rows less this year than previous years, because we were cloudy. We were stressed with excess moisture at the time. All those factors had a huge bearing on setting that maximum yield. Again, the stuff that was planted a little later came through it a lot better because they missed some of that. So it's kind of a catch-22 on that. So we can't control that, but how can we manage those types of things?
Well, thanks for your insights on the crop this year. We get the variability of the year. Next year will be a whole new story. And that's our Allied Cooperative program for this Wednesday morning with Brad Mathson, Technology Manager. And I'm Jill Welke.